Demetriou is originally a refugee from Cyprus. He came to the U.S. in 1981 when he was 21 to attend college. He earned a bachelor's in marketing and a master's in accounting at Eastern Michigan University. He is a Michigan CPA and is certified as a chief financial officer by the Michigan School Business Officials. He worked for Eastern Michigan for 11 years, then Flint Community Schools for 7, and then the Michigan Area Intermediate School District for over 9 years now. He began in the MAISD in 2004 as an assistant superintendent of business and was promoted to deputy in 2010 and was responsible for the district's finances, human resources, collective bargaining, technology, and buildings and grounds. He also provides financial procedural consultation to Muskegon County school districts. He is a trustee on the Michigan Liquid Asset Fund. It's an investment fund for about 465 school districts, and it has assets of over $1 billion. He's a founding board member of the Michigan Retirement Investment Consortium with over 250 school districts participating. Most recently, he won some very significant awards. In April 2013, he was named Michigan School Business Official of the Year. And in October of that year, that's last year obviously, he received the Eagle Award from the Association of School Business Officials International. So that's about Marios. You might recall the reason you were here is because he's going to speak tonight about school funding in Michigan, the worsening financial condition of Muskegon County school districts, and possible collaborations that could resolve part of these school budget problems. He's also going to talk about upcoming MAISD Village for Technology. Marios?
And a little bit about Muskegon Heights.
And Muskegon Heights,
because, good evening, and thank you for coming today. Well, good to see some of you I've seen before, and I've known you. And when I communicated with Tracy, she told me that I might get some tough questions about Muskegon Heights. So I wanted to address that right away and get it out of the way so we can talk about the other good stuff. So there's some slides that Muskegon Heights Emergency Manager did a presentation in December, so I took some of these slides and I'm going to show them here today. And basically, the two boards, the school district board and the academy board, they both report to him. And then these are the schools that are functioning now in Muskegon Heights. And that's his role, basically. And these are the names of the two boards that exist today. And basically he provides oversight and monitoring of the academic performance, the financial performance, make sure all the legal things are taken care of, and then they have to make sure they have board meetings and so on. And some of the achievement data that they presented, they had a public meeting, they presented this achievement data, and this is basically from September to November, and the one in blue is the goal. So they were supposed to be a growth of approximately 40%. Just to show everyone. And then the green one is reading, and this is in the high school. And they are approximately, in some grades, approximately 120%, which is 3 times higher than the goal. And then in math, they're in the 9th grade, they're below the goal, and then in the other grades, they're a little bit above the goal. In the middle school, you can see, I guess the thing doesn't work on the screen. In the 6th grade, the reading is way below the goal. And then in the 7th and 8th grade, it's about the goal, and also the math in the 7th grade is a little bit better. In the 8th grade is a little bit better than the 7th grade in math. As far as the elementary is concerned, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, they're not meeting the goal in reading, or even in the 5th grade. In the math, they're doing a lot better. So their academic performance it's up and down. It's not. In some areas they're doing great in the high school, but in the middle school they're doing some areas doing good, in some areas they're not doing good in the elementary school. It seems like reading is a big problem, and math, they're doing better in math. And that gives you a summary, but also their attendance is about 90%, which is better than it was before. Also, the discipline has decreased quite a bit. And we work with them as well at the ISD, and we make sure that the professional development is aligned to school improvement plan, and there's intervention plans at all levels. Yes?
I've understood that there's essentially some young people who sort of turned up missing when you look at the count in the public school system before the emergency manager came in, and the overall count of attendees, and then compare it with the adjoining districts. As I understand it, there are some children missing.
Well, I think what you're referring to is that in Muskegon Heights, in the census in 2010, there were approximately school-age children, approximately 2,800 kids, and there's approximately 900 kids that are attending Muskegon Heights, and there's not 1,800 kids that are attending the other school districts. And there could be a variety of reasons. One of them, the census from 2010. A lot of people have moved out, not just from Muskegon Heights, but from our county since 2010. Another one, it doesn't account for kids that are not going to school, that they dropped out and so forth. And also there's another phenomenon that kids might reside in Muskegon Heights, but when they go to another school district, they won't use the schools of choice, but they say, I have an uncle, I'm staying with my aunt. They use an address that is not theirs. So there's a lot of different reasons why, if you take the schools of choice and just Muskegon Heights enrollment and you combine them together, they're not going to match up. Yes?
Could you tell us what test instruments were used both before and post the charter school takeover? Same instrument?
The same instrument. It's issued by Scantron, the one that they're using. I think it's AHA, I think, for the, there's two of them. One of them is AHA, and I can't remember if that's the math or the reading, and there's, I think AHA is the math, and then there's one for reading, I can't remember its name.
Okay. But Scantron is not typically used by public schools.
I'm not sure. I couldn't.
Okay. So it couldn't have been the same pre-test as the post-test then?
Mark?
Yes.
If I could.
Go ahead, please.
And I don't know exactly what the Heights is doing, but, well, okay. I'm John Weaver, I'm the interim superintendent at Montefiore. But I know a lot of districts, and in particular, those that have been chartered, will use what they call the NWEA or some version of a test. They do a test, and they can do it as often as they want. And typically, they're online tests. So the kids will sit in a lab or at a laptop, take the test, and then the results will be, back within a day's time. That's typically how they do it. Nowadays, they're not using bubble tests.
Yeah, this were September through November, and I think they do it every month, and I think they just did the December one.
A lot of schools will do it 3 times a year, or just in the fall, and then measure growth in the following school. And
yes.
Chartering universities typically require that. That's how they determine growth. They, in the public, we look at a lot of measures, but predominantly the one that makes the paper is always the MEP comparisons or the ACT comparisons.
Thanks, Mario. I have a question here. It's from Karen Bednarek, who would like to be here tonight and can't be. And this follows, actually, it's the same question I think that Bruce asked, but she's being more specific. She says 400 students missing. She says Kelly Powers from the MAISD was supposed to check up on students who did not enroll last fall, whose CA-60s no other school requested. Yet, as of Christmas break, Marcia Hovey-Wright had not been given that information, and so she's asking where are they and are they receiving FAPE? So she's just asking the same question, but more specifically.
Yeah,
She
I
says
don't
that
have any
somebody there
information.
at the ISD was Kelly Powers was going to follow up with Marcia Hovey-Wright.
Yeah.
Do you know if
I can check with Kelly. But Kelly Powers does student accounting. So when he would have numbers in regards to who is enrolled in one school district, he will have numbers on schools of choice. He will not know if someone who lives in Muskegon Heights uses an address that is in Muskegon or it's in Mona Shores or those kind of things. You can't, it's impossible. And so it's some of those questions, it's going to be very hard to answer.
You know, just another wrench to throw into the mix here is that previously kids could drop out of high school at age 16, and that a lot of them did. And the state just goes into effect this month. The compulsory age for school attendance is 18 now. So it may well be there are some kids out there who really should be in school. The challenge is, where do you find them? Where are they?
I have a question. That the ISD still has oversight over the Heights as far as like attendance and enrollment and stuff like that? Or is that
No, we don't have oversight over any school district, the intermediate school district. From January 1st, 2012 through April 23rd until the emergency manager came, our superintendent was at the ISD was also the superintendent of Muskegon Heights, because legally when they don't have a superintendent, then the intermediate school district superintendent becomes their superintendent until they get one. And that's the only time that basically the superintendent of the intermediate school district was acting as the superintendent of Muskegon Heights, but at the same time they had an elected board who had oversight over the superintendent. So the ISD was not really overseeing the Heights. We helped them with the finances, we helped them with a lot of different things, but their board, their elected board, was actually still in charge at the time. Once the emergency manager came, then that all changed.
Yeah. Can you just briefly, for those who do not understand, what is the real function of the ISD?
The real function is a lot of one of them that we have a countywide special education school for the most severely impaired kids in our county. We have a vocational school. About 800 students from all over the county come to the Career Tech Center. About 200 children with severe special needs come to Wesley School. So those are some of the functions. We have a math science center, so we train teachers, administrators and so forth in math and science. We have a variety of consultants that do trainings for all the school districts in other like social studies and English language arts and so forth. On the administrative side, we have a fiber optic network throughout the whole county that all the school districts use. We have financial software that we provide to 32 school districts in Kent County, in Ottawa County, in Ingham County, in Mason Lake, and all of the school districts in Muskegon. We provide student management software to all the school districts in Muskegon. We provide a data warehouse to all the school districts in Muskegon. We have a lot of different consortiums. We have that not all of them participate, some of them participate, like a banking consortium. We have a waste management consortium. We have let me think, Special Education Transportation Consortium. We provide approximately $20 million in grants. We apply for federal grants for the whole county. For example, IDA, which is a special education grant, that's approximately $8 million. Also, we apply for a Head Start grant, which is approximately another $7 million. So there's a lot of different things that we do we provide a lot of services to local school districts, leadership, programs, those kind of things. So we're involved in a lot of different things. Yes?
I have one last question about the Muskegon Heights situation because
Okay.
I volunteer at the Martin Luther King School Library.
Okay.
And it's quite evident that they're not doing very much to improve the physical structure of the buildings, even though I believe they were purchased for a very low price, if that, maybe you know what that price was.
I'll go to my next slide, and this is the Academy's audit, and I'll go to the next slide. So basically in the general fund, they made $963. So basically in the general fund they have whatever they got to spend, about $10 million. In the capital projects fund, which is where you will do your infrastructure improvements, they have a negative, their deficit, $554,000. Basically, they didn't have any money for infrastructure. When they came in, they had to put money to fix the infrastructure because they had to get approval to have school. So they had to meet minimum standards to be able to have school. So they had to invest money in those buildings for them to pass fire codes and electrical codes and so forth. So they're a negative school district. They're in deficit in their capital projects fund. And then in the food service fund, they made $22,000. The buildings were not sold to them. They were leased to them for $1 a year. So they don't belong to the academy. They belong to the school district. But they are leased to them, basically.
So if they decide to leave at the end of this year, then they revert to the school district.
Absolutely.
And somebody else has to be found to take responsibility.
Well, the school district is the board, the emergency managers, that's one of his duties. So if the charter school leaves, the emergency manager is still in charge of the finances, the infrastructure, the academics, and so forth. So he's still responsible. Okay, so now we can move. Thank you. Now we're going to get into school financing and what's been happening with school financing in Michigan in general, and then we'll get into a little bit into the county. So the school aid budget, which is where the money comes from to pay for schools, public schools, and public school academies in the state of Michigan, and this is in our constitution. It basically says it's for free public elementary and secondary schools. And it's pretty clear. And we'll find out that sometimes we don't follow our constitution. And the money that comes all over the state of Michigan is about $13.4 million, and about $1.8 million, or $1.8 billion comes from the federal government. The rest of it comes from the state. And when it comes from the state, it's about $11.5 billion. And you see most of it comes from the sales tax. Back when the sales tax was 4%, it went to 6%, so that 2% goes to education. And then there's income tax, state education tax, those make up the majority of where the money comes from. I always get questions about the lottery. It's about 7.5%, so about $750 million that comes to education from the lottery. Where does the money go? Most of it goes to, about 67% goes to the foundation. And then special education is about $1.4 billion. And then other federal programs, such as Title I, Title II, and so forth, those are approximately $1.3 billion. And then other programs, and then MEPSers. And it's very important to see that MEPSers gets $500 million. And that money doesn't come to schools, or if it does come to schools, it automatically goes back to MEPSers. So this is kind of a new phenomenon that's happened in the last couple of years. It wasn't happening before. Last year was the first time, and this year is the second year. And we'll talk a little bit further. And then another new phenomenon is best practices, $176 million. And basically, in order for you to get that money, you have to do something. In other words, you have to, some of the things, or become the policyholder in your health care. Then you have to do a consolidation study. You have to do, there's some things that you have to do in order to be eligible to get them. I work for an ISD, and you can see ISDs get $64 million. There's 56 now ISDs. So we average a little bit over $1 million each. So we don't get that much money from the school aid fund. So that was to kind of, so it gives you a little bit more knowledge about ISDs. Now, what are the major issues that we face in school funding? Try to list some of them. A few years back, the Michigan business tax was eliminated, and that was approximately $750 million that used to come to the school aid fund that went to education, and now that's it was replaced with a new 6% corporate tax, and that corporate tax goes into the general fund. It does not go into education. So the $750 million basically are gone. Then, I'm not sure in the next slide, there was, when Proposal A was passed, there were kind of promises that the general fund was going to keep supporting to the same level the school aid fund. And we're going to see right away that did not happen, and it started going down even I think the next year. A new phenomenon that started probably when the last year, I think that Ms. Granholm was the governor. She took about $200 million out of the K-12 and gave it to colleges and universities. And now we're up to $400 million. So when we saw the first slide about school funding, we talked about our Constitution. We talked about elementary and secondary education. So this is not, in my mind, this doesn't meet our Constitution, so that $400 million. There were programs that the general fund used to pay, and now the school aid fund pays for, to the tune of $425 million. So if you add everything up, it's approximately $2 billion, or approximately $1,320 per student. And we have approximately 26,000 students. So you take that 26,000 students and multiply by $1,320, you're going to come around $30+ million. So that's what's been one of our problems that has been happening to education.
The 1,300 is from what year?
Probably since Proposal A, I would say. Some of those things, like the general fund support to school aid fund, the $431 million, I'm comparing what, when Proposal A passed, the general fund used to support approximately $665 million, and now it's approximately $230-some million. Now, I'll have a slide, I'll show you. And the numbers, I didn't create those numbers. Those numbers came from the House Fiscal Agency. So I can't take credit, but I can show you and kind of explain to you what those things mean.
Mario?
Yes.
I'm sorry. When you just now multiplied out that number and said we have X number of students and therefore we're losing, compared to before, round numbers, 30 million a year. That's in Muskegon County alone?
Yes.
Okay. Just
$2 billion statewide. $2 billion statewide. What I'm saying is, if things were not changed, if the funding for schools remain where they didn't take the $400 million for colleges and universities, where the general fund still paid for the programs it used to pay, where the Michigan business tax, if you're going to take that away, you should replace it with something else, not just don't give you anything to replace it. So all these things together, basically, you're taking $2 billion out of the system. Even in good times, we're having issues. Now that, I mean, these are good times right now for Michigan. We're on a big rebound. We don't see any money coming to education. And we're going to see that in a little bit later.
Tomorrow is the revenue estimating conference, and we're
Yes.
expecting another big chunk. I think it's 1.2 million. They're still not talking about adding money back into the education fund. Every time we have a revenue estimating conference, it's like 400 million to 500 million, and it never goes to education, not in 3 years. I mean, this is extra money that we didn't anticipate getting. It wasn't allocated to anything else, and it's still not being considered for education. We keep trying to propose that, but the Dems do, but it never happens.
Mario, can you remind me when you proposed what year that was?
1994.
94. So
20 years.
So we've been on this deficit path for that long?
We had some really good years in the late 1990s. I would say in the mid-2000, you'll see, I'll show you some slides and then it will probably in the last 6, 7 years, we have been on a I would say, a downslide in education. Some other issues that funding issues in education and special education funding, declining enrollment, the impact of public school academies and cyber schools, equity. Some school districts get some 15,000, 16,000 students. Most of our school districts here are around 7,000 students. Healthcare, retirement costs, and sequestration. Showing the money that comes to education, where we showed you earlier that was about a little bit over $13 billion. And you can see, if you look at 2007, 1308. Now you got to remember, I showed you that $500 million goes to MEPSers, right? So you take that 13,367, you take $500 million out of that because that goes to MEPSers. So you're down to 12.8. So when you look at 12.8, you're looking at 2006. What education is getting is the same amount of money they were getting in 2006. So inflation, and I'll show you some numbers on some of the things that impact education and what the inflation factor was on that, and then you'll see why we're having some issues. This slide includes the federal money. This does not. This is just state money. And again, the $500 million that goes to MEPSers, it's all from state money. So from 11,470, you take 500 million, you're at 11 billion. 11 billion, again, you're somewhere 2006, 2005. So, yes.
I think it's important to make sure people know what MIPSERS is. It's the
Michigan
teacher
Public Schools
retirement
Employees
system.
Retirement System. Yes.
And originally that was funded differently.
It was funded, schools paid 5%, and the state put in the rest of it. And then when Proposal A passed, one of the agreements is that the schools will basically pay the full rate. So that's what we have today.
But if you look historically, there was also coverage of health care by the state, and the state pulled out of that. And I mean, there.
It's part of your pension. There's also healthcare component, and like in the day, 100% was paid by the schools or the state, and now I believe it's at 80%, and then the employee has to, or the retiree has to pay the other 20%, depending on when you retired, probably.
But if you take history back to 1990 and 92, there were some changes made under Governor Engler that had consequences for the whole MIPSR system to be less well-funded. And I would like to have a talk from you sometime about all of that, because I don't understand.
Well, I'm not sure if I know what happened in 91, 92. We talked about earlier how much the general fund was supporting the school aid fund. And going back to 95, where Proposal 8 became effective, there was $665 million. You'll see today is $234 million, and it was a couple of years ago it was down to $19 million. So this is what I would call, a disinvestment in education. So it's pretty clear what's happened. Special education, it's approximately $1.4 billion, and it's been, those costs have been pretty stable throughout the time. But if you compare it to 2005, you'll see that they went up approximately, I think, 10% or so, which hasn't happened to the K-12. So when that goes up, then the K-12 it has to be taken out of the regular basis, not the K-12. What's happened to our student membership? We talked about declining enrollment statewide. And you'll see today 1,520,000 students. And you'll see in 1995 we had 1,590,000 students. We have less students today than we had back in 1995. So compared to 2004 or 5, we lost 200,000 students in the last 10 years. It's not only that, it's worse than that. Because in that 1,500,000 too, you have 150,000 that are in charter schools and they are in cyber schools. So in regular public schools, you really have less than 1.3 million students. Whereas in 1995, there was hardly any charter schools and there was no cyber schools. So in public schools, you have 200,000 students less than you had in 1995.
In the county,
In the state.
or in the state.
So this shows you what's happened to public school academies. Back in 94, 95, they had less than 5,000 students. 20 years later, they had about 140,000 students. So when I showed you the numbers before, you need to take those out because they're not in public schools. Cyber schools, that's something that just started in the last couple of years. And if you remember, to go back, look where the public school academy started, probably less than 5,000 students. And they're at 6,000 today. And they just started. So if if you follow the same trend line that happened before, 20 years from now, they probably have 140, 150,000 students. Yes?
Who is responsible for monitoring the activity levels in the cyber schools?
Whoever is authorizing it. Any school district can have a cyber school if they want. Their MD is supposed to be monitoring achievement and so forth. But
Is it happening?
I don't know.
Whereas I just add to that that there's currently no research that supports the efficacy of cyber schools or online schools. And yet
It's being pushed.
and I know for Montague, we're required this year to post this month all of our online options for students so they can take online learning courses. And if a district or a high school doesn't offer that sort of thing, then kids have an option to take what's known as the Michigan Virtual University Schools and take online classes there. It sounds great, but it's going to be a $500 bill out of the high school to pay for that class, for that online class. So, and that's one kid. So, I mean, if that grows legs and everybody starts doing that, you know, that's another added cost to a district. It's a loss. It's a cost. It's for-profit entity.
Yes. K-12 education is a for-profit entity. There's plenty of articles that the CEO makes $5 million and the chief financial officer makes $3 million and so forth. There are countrywide cyber schools.
How can you be public and for profit?
So these are cyber schools that actually operate beyond Michigan. When you say countrywide,
Yes, yes,
nationwide,
yeah,
in the United States.
yes. They have charter schools. Some of them are run by for-profit organizations. Some of them are for non-profit. Some of them, most of them are for-profit.
I just think that's my point. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't make sense that if you are a for-profit entity, you are not a public serving entity. I think you agree with me by the smile on your face.
I'm just saying it's happening. It's happening in Muskegon Heights.
Oh, right. It just makes no sense. Like, it really does. Like you said, the constitutionality of, Constitution says this.
Mario, just one other question. These for-profit companies that are operating the cyber schools, do we have good numbers on how much money they have contributed to candidates and candidate committees for the Michigan legislature?
You can just check with the co-founders are paying.
I have no such information.
You
Maybe
can get
Marcia
it online. Just look up a few Republican representatives.
Well, a couple of Democrats there's some Democrats
Well, yeah,
nationally.
there are a couple
Well, I'm not talking at
of
state level, but nationally there's a couple of Democrats.
Yeah, you're right. In Detroit.
Governor Snyder made a statement in 2010, I think, or 2011, that cyber schools would not be increased until their efficacy could be proven in an evidence-based way. And then suddenly the legislature increased the limit and it didn't get vetoed. So I think we need to keep accountable both Governor Snyder and any legislator who voted for that, because the cyber schools are operating with very little oversight and accountability and very little evidence that they even work to begin with.
Are they paid
Yes.
by which district amount? You know, like some districts get 7,000, some get 12. How much do they get?
I'm not sure how the cyber schools are paid. I know, like the charter schools, there's a minimum amount or the average of the county.
Is that
I would
what
assume-
Bob was trying to explain a moment ago? When you say 500,
It's a little bit different because there you can be a full-time online student or you can be in a high school and take 1 hour of, Algebra 2 online.
So they would get
They will get,
prorated.
if they're full-time and let's say you live in, the student lives in Montague, my assumption is that they're going to get paid what Montague would have paid.
And they don't have to supply any of the extra services, counselors or special ed or buses or infrastructure, and they get the same amount.
Yeah, we have a football.
Ask me what.
No football team.
I think what it ultimately comes down to is the idea of cyber schools, and in some cases, the charter schools, especially ones that have taken over the school district, is the people who pay the taxes in that school district, the parents whose kids are in that school district, no longer have a say in how the money is. And that ultimately is the problem. And I honestly believe, I can see the look in your eye like you're like, I kind of agree with you.
I'm going to move on.
I
You guys want to go home, right? I have no more slides.
We could talk about this all night.
Yeah.
Education, we can talk about.
All right. Equity is another issue, and we talked about most of our school districts are in the very bottom. We have a couple that are in the second to the bottom.
Like a 1%.
But there's 80% of school districts in Michigan are in the bottom two. But you do have some school districts that make more than 11.5. Some of them are in the Upper Peninsula, some of them are in Oakland County, and so forth. Talking about Webster's and medicine, healthcare, and so forth. And I took some numbers from 1999-2000, and you can see Webster's was at the time we were paying 11.66%, and then the foundation at the time was $6,000. And you can look at 13-14. What our schools paying for Webster's is 24.7. There's 7 different rates, but most people are 24.79. Plus, we talked about that $500 million that is being taken out and basically given to Webster's. That's another 4.56%. So in essence, school districts pay 29.35%. And in addition to that, employees contribute from 3 to 11%, depending on which program you have. So, to go from 11.66 to 29 over this period of time. Also, and if you look on the bottom, you'll see that Webster's increased 151% during this time. You'll see that Mesa, at the time, everybody pretty much had super care, was $8,500. Right now, we have caps. It doesn't matter what you have. If you have a cap or you pay the 20%. I use the cap number, I think it's 15,525. So, if you use the 1999-2000 to the cap number, that's about 82.5% increase in healthcare. And then if you look what happened to the foundation in this 14 years, it increased 17.1%, which is just a little bit over 1% a year. So you can easily see, I mean, all the stuff that I'm showing you is that it's not a secret why school districts are having financial issues. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here.
I'm sorry, Morris, but
It's okay.
I just want to make this note too. There are a number of reasons why Webster's has gone up. And some of it is because the investments, because of the economy tanked.
Mm-hmm.
So that created a shortfall. A number of districts across the state did buyouts, in those earlier years, and that put more people in the system. And then another thing that districts had done, and are still doing, is privatizing. And when you privatize, now you have fewer people paying into the system. So those are 3 big ones, I think, in my mind, that have created it. Because done this long enough, I can remember it was a 5% contribution.
Mhm.
And the real retirement contribution is somewhere in the 30s. Isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
30,
Oh, yeah.
33?
It's-
And the state kind of, on the down low, is kind of backfilling.
Well, I mean, if you combine what the school districts are paying, plus the 500 million that they're taking, plus what the employee pays, it's closer to 40%. It's, at a minimum, everybody has to pay the 3%. So at a minimum, you're at 32%. And then,
Percent of what?
of payroll. So for every dollar that you make, for every dollar that anybody makes, then the school district contributes 25 cents. And then the state takes 5 cents off the top. And then the employee pays at least another 3 cents. And some employees, based on the choice they made, they could pay up to 11 cents. So it's somewhere between 32 and 40.
Here's a question, will they be able to opt out of that program and go into the affordable care and maybe get a better rate or something? Or are they stuck in it because of some contract negotiations or something?
Retirees have a choice of taking this health care or not. But the pension is, you work so many years based on your average 3 years or 5 years, depending which program you're in. There's a formula of how much money you're going to get from your pension. The healthcare piece, you have a choice. I believe it's an HMO and a PPO, or you don't want to take it.
The retirement system did do a restructuring last year as well, so they have tried to tweak it. And so
Did it help? That's what I'm.
well,
It's
there is still out there.
I think when they make changes, the effect, you don't see the effect for like 5 years, 10 years, and down the line. You don't get the effect right away. This is for the politicians in the room, and then for the ones that are not here. And I don't know if you've seen this. Oh. So, I will try to get into some of our county numbers and so forth. Enrollment, and you can see in the last 5 years, in Muskegon County public schools lost about 10%, almost 11% of their enrollment. Muskegon Heights is included in there. You'll see the big difference, 11, 12 to 12, 13. And actually, this year, we have more students than we had the year before, which is the first time I've seen that number since I've been here, and this is like 10 years. Looking at the foundation, which is the foundation grant, this is the money that public schools get for each student. And this tracks the history, and you can see 13, 14 is at 7,026. I can't see the years, but 7,085 in 2007. again, it just shows you that there's no money coming to the schools, and you can see that we were at 68.46, that, you know, the big drop from 73.16 to 68.46 that happened a couple of years ago. We still haven't come up with $290 away from where we were 3 years ago. And then you can see in those 3 years that we didn't get any increases, and then a decrease. So it just clearly shows you why school districts are having issues. One of the symptoms when you don't have money, it's like you go and you borrow money and to make ends meet, because the way we're getting paid, schools start July 1st. A new year, a new fiscal year starts July 1st. The first time a school district gets paid for that year is October 20th. So if you don't have enough money to carry you over, then you need to go borrow some. And that borrowing costs some money. And I just put up some numbers, and it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to borrow money because interest rates are so low. But if you look in 2008 and 9, we borrowed $29 million. And then 11-12, it was 37. Now in 12-13, it dropped to 33.4. But that's not a true number, because that year, Muskegon Heights went and borrowed $11.1 million. But it wasn't, this cash flow is you borrow the money in August, and then you pay back during the year, or you pay back the next August. So within a year, you need to pay this money back. Muskegon Heights, instead of getting a cash flow note, they basically got a long-term 27-year note. So they're going to pay back in 2041 or something. Yes?
Recently, Muskegon Heights indicated that they were in a deficit situation after going through change and paying their teachers so much less, and how can that be explained that they would have a deficit?
We kind of went through it before, but basically the general fund is not in deficit. The capital projects fund is in deficit, approximately $550 million, $550,000. And that's because they had to fix the buildings before they took occupancy and so forth. And they didn't have any money for basically fixing the buildings.
Do they default on the bonds?
No, this is not the Muskegon Heights Public School District. This is Muskegon Heights Public School Academy. The Muskegon Heights Public Schools have not defaulted on their bond payments or anything like that. They're still collecting. The Muskegon Public Schools is still there. They collect taxes, and the money that they collect from the taxes goes to pay the loan that they have. They still have 2 or 3 employees, or 1 employee, and then they contract with a couple of people. They still have to pay. They still have to pay the emergency manager. So they still the public school district still exists, and then the academic part is basically contracted out to Mosaic. But you can see that there's as high as $1 million in 2019 was in order to get this loan. It cost about $1.1 million, and now it's costing about $400,000 because interest rates are way lower, closing costs are way lower, and so forth. What's happening with employees? I'm not sure why it should be. Not everything shows up, but you can see the employees are down approximately 324 And then enrollment is down about 2,759. So as enrollment drops, school districts have to reduce their employees that work for them. This shows the fund balances. So on the right hand side, you see what's happening, what school districts use from their fund balance. And you'll see that over this 5-year period, they've used about $13 million. In 12-13, Muskegon Heights is not included in those numbers. That's why you see an increase of $6.6 million. Muskegon Heights had approximately $12 million deficit, 11.8. So if you include Muskegon Heights, that would be a negative, not a negative $5.6 million, and that fund equity will be gone, basically. But the other school districts, pretty much 50% of their fund equity was used in the last 5 years. You'll see in 11-12, that was a huge change. A big part of that was Muskegon Heights. So what does the fund equity look like countywide? That's what it looks like. In 11-12, the previous year included Muskegon Heights because they were a public school at the time. So, but right now, countywide is 5.31%. We already have one school district that is in deficit in 12-13.
Mario, it's
Yes.
when you express it as a percent, that's expressed as a percent of annual operating costs.
Yes, that's a percent of
Still
their.
have $5 in the bank and expect to spend another 95 in the whole year for a total of 100.
This is, they're audited. It's like, for example, if you have, like you said, if you have you're spending $100 a year, at the end of the year, you basically have $5 left.
And that's the carryover that you need from August 1 to October 20.
Well, you need a little more,
Among other
because
things.
if you had enough, you wouldn't be going out and borrowing.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And every year you're borrowing more and more. A few months ago, all the business managers in the county got together and decided on some assumptions that, for example, we're going to get 1% more money from locally, we're going to get 1% more from the state for the next 3 years. We wanted to do kind of 3-year projections, and we used some assumptions that were not too conservative, they were not too liberal, but middle of the road. We assume that the money coming from the feds will be decreasing by approximately 2% per year. I can tell you this year it decreased more than 2% because of sequestration. There were federal grants that were completely gone. There were others that were cut 5%. There were others that were cut almost nothing. But overall, it was closer to 6%. So then we assume some of the things that that we will be spending, like insurance is 3.5%. The retirement rate for next year, we already know, is 25.78. And we just made different assumptions, basically. And then we built the budgets for the next 3 years. And this is what it looks like. For this year, 13-14, that we would have 2 school districts that would be in deficit. We already have one. In 14-15, that would be 4 districts. On the very right-hand side, you see how many districts. And that's if we don't do anything, and we just keep, based on these assumptions, if nothing is done, this is what we can expect. In 15-16, we'll have a negative fund balance countywide, and that 7 school districts will be in deficit. And then 16-17, all 11 school districts in a county will be in deficit. what this tells us, in order for us to make it in the next 3 years, we need to cut $32.6 million, or we need to generate that money. So it might be a combination of we generate some money, and then we also need to reduce expenses.
What are you going to cut? Everything's been cut.
Well,
What are you going to cut?
I'm kind of the messenger telling you that things can't continue the way they go.
Corporations are tax free. Just saying.
So
Just saying.
this is, we keep doing the same thing. This is, we can't expect different results, basically. So one of the things that we're going to switch a little bit and go into the superintendents and the ISD decided to do a study and decided to do a study on consolidating support services. So those services are like business office, HR, food service, transportation, custodial, clerical, all those services that are not directly dealing with instruction. So we basically had a bunch of meetings, and then we hired a consultant, and then the consultant started in March, and he went through September basically, and he talked to a bunch of different staff at every school district, at the ISD. He collected a whole bunch of data from the school districts, from the ISD, and so forth, and then did a whole bunch of analysis, and then gave us, I don't know, 900 recommendations or something like that. So, but the summary is that he basically told us that we should create about 16 countywide consortiums in, around HR, business, transportation, the things that I mentioned earlier. To standardize the practices across the county, use best practices across the county, aligning all our instructional materials, and then we need to conduct all these services as if we are one school district versus being 11 in the ISD 12. So, and that the only thing that matters is instruction, and anyways, a lot of planning, a lot of management will need to take place. So, I think in October we had a meeting with pretty much all the board members from every school district were invited. Not everybody showed up, but I think about 80 or so people showed up, which is all the school districts were present. Some of the board members, not all of them, and pretty much all the superintendents were present. So we shared pretty much this presentation with them. And so we got the report to all the board members. We asked them to review the reports and the recommendations, to consider having an implementation plan that's 3 to 5 years long, and continue to look at the 3-year budget and see how close or how far and what needs to be done, and communicate the fiscal crisis to our community, which is what we're doing here tonight, and which is something else that we're going to do next. We're going to talk about our technology millage and all-time favorite. We need more money.
Demand more funding.
I have a question, Harry.
Yes.
After you do your consolidation, you pay for all the studies, you didn't tell me what the savings were going to be.
Okay. I can't tell you until, depending what we do. There's a lot of decisions. I'll give you an example. when we did a study, one of the school districts was paying 71 cents per square foot to clean their building. Another school district on the high end was paying $1.65 to clean their building. Some school districts using the same vendor to clean their buildings were paying 91 cents, and another school district using the same vendor was paying $1.01. So we discovered a lot of discrepancies that are happening. So depending how you structure it, and then there's different savings. We found the same thing in transportation. Some school districts were paying up to $4.69 per mile. And others were, so depending how which decisions are made and how it's structured and how it's been, there's different savings. Yes, sir.
This is kind of not directed at you, but I know we have a couple of superintendents here. Both of you are. What is your opinion about this? I mean, I've seen this work in other school districts.
Let me just say that when we talk about consolidation, I think people need to know what's going on. There is service consolidation, which is, I think, this model here.
Right.
And then there is talk of district consolidation.
Like educational consolidation.
No, like 2 become 1 or 3 become 1. And
I've seen that.
You grow a big district.
Yeah.
And it's a common practice down south. I know I've got relatives in Virginia, and they have countywide and Commonwealth schools. The thing is, they'll have the math science high school, and you pick and choose.
No, Ann Arbor does the same thing. So
yeah.
That's like Washington.
You know, and Jerry and I, and Marius, we've been hammering this stuff for months, like Mario says. But I think, too, you have to, what's going to work. Now, for some districts, the reason they're paying $1.71 a square foot, because in the days of milk and honey, they were giving away all sorts of things, and they never got them back in negotiations. Whereas the district that was paying 60 some cents, they just kind of kept the lid on things. And so, for some districts, it's a fact they can do it cheaper. I know when I was at North Muskegon, I was superintendent of North Muskegon for 7 years, and we did privatize the 3 or 4 custodians we had, because we could save $86,000, because prior to me, and back again in the days of milk and honey, when you could do things for your employees, you gave them full health coverage, you gave them all these nice things. And then this happened to us. For some things, it doesn't work. Transportation. Some bus drivers were making a scale up here and had the same health insurance that the teachers had. The bus drivers at North Muskegon were paid $12 and some cents and didn't have any insurance. So to join a consortium actually would have cost $18,000. So it makes sense. So I think, personally, I think we will, we've got this long list of things, and I think it's going to come down to this is going to work, this one isn't going to work. Because I think our job is we have to be responsible. Our districts are.
I agree with you. I was, I hope you don't rush into it. I was just wondering what you guys' take on the whole looking at, working with each other, the school districts. I mean, I know some communities are a lot closer, Monty, Whitehall, those kind of communities kind of interlap, with better communications, I guess, between the school districts and the...
Well, with any transaction, there's an opportunity cost. And one of the things that, Jen and I talk about is how can we work together collaboratively without spending any money? What types of things can we just be mutually beneficial toward each other? The other thing that you have to think about is what type of service delivery are you going to get from an organization that may be 20 miles away? We have taxpayers that have locally funded our school districts, and they expect us to keep it up. And we have, in my situation, I have fairly paid employees who do a great job. They're responsive to our needs. They've been in our community for 20, 30 years, and they work hard. And when I look at some of this, and I think the knowledge and the the history that they have. I appreciate the community, or the communication and the connectivity to them. I've yet to see any cost savings or gains from any of these studies. I think Rick Peterson did a very thorough job. I would say, like Mario's presented, 2 companies charging 2 different school districts 2 different amounts of money. Well, he also did not do a contract analysis of those 2 contracts. It's like going to McDonald's on the dollar menu and ordering a McChicken and a double, and you pay $2. Well, if you only order a McChicken, you only pay $1. So until we break that down, exact service for exact service, we won't know what the cost savings are.
But you guys are still looking into that, because I mean, you guys have to weigh all your options, I understand.
Yes.
Well, we're ready to do the White Lake Community Schools anytime. I'm not going there, but maybe. I mean, what other place would it work so? I guess the other thing, too, is, there's been talk about any school that's 1,500 kids, and mine use, fortunately this year, 1,523. They were a little less than that last year. But any school, I mean, there's talk of any school that's 1,500 or less. When you hit the magic red letter up there, and you go into deficit, or your fund balance drops pretty low, you should be consolidate. And, okay, it's kind of like punishing you for whatever happened in your district. But and what they're saying, we need to make these districts bigger to make them more cost effective. But then at the same time, they're saying, well, let's get more of these charter schools, we need more of this, we need these online options for kids. And so that doesn't make sense. You're telling the public, we got to get bigger, and that there's some inherent efficiency in being bigger. When things get bigger, sometimes they're not always better.
There's not any definitive research on some of the service consolidation as well. The research out of Michigan State would indicate that some of these systems would work, but only some of them, which I think Mario said that we have to look at them individually and see what the benefit is.
It's still in the early stages.
It's not the real early stages.
Yes, this is all very business-like, and it should be. But as in the final analysis, along with making these adjustments, consolidating and cutting costs and finding alternatives and so forth, and we can go a lot further in that direction if we put our minds to it. But in the final analysis, we have to have, along with that, I would believe, some analysis of the effect upon the student. And how is our final product the student, and the tracking, how is it improving their lives? Have we turned them on? Have we found the spark in them, and have they identified the spark? Because all of that, eventually, the real students, the students that make a difference, the students that propel us into the future, are those students that have identified within themselves what really inspires them. And if any of this doesn't examine that and take a measurement of that and find the realization of that, this is all just hokey pokey. And I'm glad Muskegon Intermediate School District, the question was asked at one meeting, and you get these school shootings and all this and so forth. The big thing there, these people have a mental problem. Until we start addressing the mental reliability of students and that, so forth. And I was glad to see that the question was raised at one meeting that, are we keeping track of these students after they get out of high school? They get out of high school, they're on their own. They had a terrible home environment. They don't have anywhere to go mentally. They're out there on the loose. And they want to make a contribution to well, they finally do end up making a contribution, but it isn't very much the one we want. And until you get mental health and all that, because that's where it's all at. And you have to find the spring within each individual and let them go.
I'd just like to add, kind of along the lines of that, and it's really a spin-off or a facet of the economy, and that is just the ever-increasing poverty rates in Michigan. I think I heard today on the news 13 million kids are in poverty, and it's right here in Monmouth. You know, Dan's here, he knows the numbers as far as our free and reduced lunch numbers, which is an indicator of child poverty, and it's huge, and it's going up every year. And these are kids who don't have technology at all. Some of them, you know, deal with kids, our power's turned off, or we don't have power.
Yeah, right.
It's bad. I mean, they're saying this generation of kids is right there with the depression kids of the 29, 28 years.
That's the reality. I know, but I like on that meeting I was talking about, is someone raised the question to the intermediate school district about are they tracking these kids after they get out of school? Has anybody ever called up 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, what, you know, and say, how are things going?
Pete, I think we got your question, and let's keep the floor open for other people's questions for a moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, back in 05 or 04, I was a school social worker. Loved my job. And that was, you know, one of the many years where there were cuts. And that year they cut social workers, the librarians. Since then they've cut Title IX, or Title I, which also is reading. Counselors are gone by the wayside. There used to be a counselor in every building in my district. Now there's one for the whole.
We have police and police.
You know, this disinvestment in education is really hurting kids, and it's creating more of mental health problems for kids that can't be successful because they don't get some of the extra help that we used to have. You know, I was at a conference of legislators from all over the Midwest a couple of summers ago, and 2 Republicans from Michigan were bragging about all the reforms that they've made. And I mean, I sat there and listened, and finally I said, but you're destroying our whole system. You know, we've got teachers that don't want to teach anymore, people that don't want to tell their grandkids to go into education anymore because it's just become such a I don't know what it's become, but it's not good.
Very challenging.
Challenging, okay.
So what you're saying is counselors over canine searches, right? Counselors are more effective in schools than, say, letting police come in with canines and go through your kids' stuff. Yeah, just helping my kids.
Counselors help kids.
Yeah.
Be more
But it's
successful.
creating a supportive environment,
Right.
not a fearful environment. That's what's important. That's what encourages kids.
I'm sitting here and I'm shaking. I don't know if I'm shaking because I'm angry or because I'm cold.
Yes.
But, okay, I don't know which one it is. But it seems to me that so much of this is being driven by the people that are in control in Lansing right now. You've got, you know, the program of cuts and consolidation and privatizing. And last time I knew that those were kind of, there were carrots for that kind of thing. To me, they were just bribes. You know, if you do these things that we want you to do, the best practices, bribes and threats, then you maybe get a few more dollars thrown your way. Is that still happening?
Yeah.
Okay, that's still happening.
That's 176.
So
But it's
basically,
not best education practices.
no, nothing to do with
But
education.
doesn't that go away, Marios, that best practices?
It's one
Yeah,
time,
7
it's one-time funding, and they can take it away.
I agree with you.
So basically what's happening in our school districts is the school boards and school administrators are doing the dance for the state. They're doing what they're being told to do, and they're being controlled in order to take education in the direction that these people in control want education to go, which is basically, if you extrapolate out from what you put up there on that screen, they're starving the schools out, and there are not going to be any public schools if it keeps up.
Yeah, they want public schools to go bankrupt so that they can go, hey, here's an emergency manager for your school.
Right, that and the EAA.
Once whoever controls the money, so school districts, 85% of the money, 85% of the money comes from the state. So the state controls the money. The decisions they make directly affect the schools. When I showed you earlier, when $2 billion is taken out of the system, then it is not anything that the schools did. It's all so actions that were taken in Madison. So we're going to be here all night.
I'm very passionate about education.
Yeah, why don't we let Mario's finish?
Yeah.
Because we're truly, I mean, it's 8:35. Some people want to go home tonight.
All right, now we're going to get into what I showed you earlier. There was the next 3 years were basically based on the assumptions that we made. We had about a $32 million shortage. So one of the ways to make up for that is to generate more money. School districts don't have any choice of how to generate money for their operations, basically. So they have a couple of options, but those options really need to come through the ISD, through the intermediate school district. One of them is the enhancement millage, and all the school districts have requested that the ISD put out a ballot proposal for a technology millage. And once all the school districts, or once more than 50% of the school districts, or more, any of the school districts that represent more than 50% of the students in the county ask us, we have to put it in the ballot. The ISD has to put it in the ballot. So, and just, technologies become very integral part of education now. And when this funding proposal A was passed, or these funding mechanisms that we have, they don't really take into account technology. So I'm just going to show you a little video. About technology. I hope you can
Yesterday's education was chalk and chalkboards, 16mm films and film strips, textbooks and paper tests. But today's education is document cameras and digital projectors, laptops, Chromebooks, iPads, and apps. Research is online, video too, and even an encyclopedia lives on the web. Distance learning is common and collaboration is instant across the state or across the ocean. And you are as likely to see a lecture online as in the classroom. And with technology impacting every corner of our daily lives, and given technology's enormous promise in education, we would expect that our students would have nearly unlimited access to technology at school. But very few do. And access is the key. The promise of technology cannot be realized with a once-a-week or once-a-day trip to the computer lab. When a teacher can provide regular access to technology, they can challenge the advanced student, engage and inspire the middle-of-the-road student, and support the student who might be struggling. Teachers can tailor learning to each student's needs. Regular access doesn't just provide students an opportunity to learn technology, preparing them for future careers. It allows students to use technology to learn. And just as technology doesn't always take the form of a computer in business, not all technology comes in the form of a computer in school. Static textbooks can be replaced by tablets or laptops, adding video, interactivity, and frequent content updates. Instead of writing a paper, students can use technology to produce a video, podcast, or PowerPoint show to prove their mastery of a subject. Then share what they've learned with their classmates. And be honest. Which backpack would you rather take home? If the benefits are so great for all of our students, why isn't technology being used at a greater rate? There simply aren't enough devices to go around. And why is that? School funding is a prime reason. Today's per-student funding is less than it was in 2007. As school funding goes down and operating costs increase, schools don't have the money to invest in technology and the associated infrastructure. Which is why the public school boards of Muskegon County have asked the ISD to place a technology and security enhancement millage on the February 25th ballot to fund the technology tools our students need and the security they deserve. At $1 million, this enhancement millage will only increase the average homeowner's taxes by $41 annually, but it will generate almost $161 per student every year for 10 years to provide improved technology and security. And by law, every cent goes directly to our neighborhood schools. The benefit of this approach is that each district will be able to spend their money based on their technology and security needs. Almost every district will be spending part of their money to replace worn or out-of-date devices or software on a more regular basis. Some will provide an in-school, one-to-one environment, so students will have access to a computer device throughout the day. Many will be investing in the wireless infrastructure needed to provide students with filtered and appropriate internet access and school networks for data storage and research. Districts will also be able to provide professional development for teachers so they can employ technology to their students' maximum benefit. And every district will be enhancing building security. That might take the form of card access, more secure entrances, additional security cameras, or digital recording devices. Again, meeting the individual needs of each district. Investing in technology for our students will help increase their academic achievement and provide the technological support teachers need to make all students successful. Technology helps teachers teach, students learn, and makes the future brighter for all of us. Our students are ready to put technology to use in school. Consider their needs when you vote on February 25th.
I think all that information, I have some more slides. I'll show them pretty quickly, but all the information was basically shared on that video. And I just like the pictures of the kids. So I'm really sure. You guys can read, and I'm going to read this stuff to you. Is that one of your schools? This picture? I know the boy is from Monarchy. That was shown in the video. It's Mrs. Tank's son.
Whose son?
Kristen Tank.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
It's, you know, when we talked about funding earlier, this will generate a little bit over $4 million a year that will go into the schools. The ISD will collect the money, and within 10 days, we need to distribute that money back to all the school districts based on the number of students they have. So the ISD does not get any of the money. Charter schools cannot get any of this money. It all goes to public schools by law. And as an ISD, I only have 10 days to get it to them. So I'm not sure they're happy about that. So technology, I don't think you can be successful without having technology nowadays. And next year, all the assessments need to be online. So if you don't have the equipment, you can't do the assessments, and then
They should have to provide the equipment.
How bad is that?
yes.
Of all
say
the-
that it wasn't too long ago. I want to remember the number, the budget for MEAP, and this is before the ACT MME for high school, but just the K-8, 9th grade MEAPs. The budget for printing the tests, getting them in boxes, getting them posted, getting them scored, because they were, the little bubble tests, $28 million. So I would think this would be cheaper and would get your results back.
Maybe use that $20 million that they were spending for like 2 years.
Yeah.
I think that was 8 years ago, it was $20 million. And that's just predominantly printing and shipping.
Yes.
I guess my question is, of all the needs that schools have, how is it that technology rises to the top? For me, I look at this and I see more compliance with those who are in power for the kind of schools that they want, which is fewer teachers, more one-on-one time with computers, and less one-on-one time with teachers, and less interaction between students. It's more time kids sitting in front of computers. And I can't...
Yeah, I would like the, I'd like to hear from the superintendent. I mean, how do you feel about that?
In early, that's not the intent to use the technology. Teachers have for long been facilitators of learning, and what the technology and the tool allows for is research, engagement, real-life information at your fingertips, and it allows the teachers to work independently with students, and the technology also engages. Kids are interested in saving and sharing the documents, they communicate back and forth easily, and the technology makes the role of the teacher more efficient, and they are able to spend more time actually interacting with children and building off of the relationship and the rigor. It's really an exciting time in education when we talk about the use of technology to move our kids forward. But as you say, it does not replace the teacher, and Whitehall District Schools does not visualize kids.
There won't be fewer teachers as a result of this.
No, I would say that would not happen.
I would say you're readying these schools for takeover by the state, because if you look at how they've run their charter schools, it's kids sitting in front of computers. So you'll have these school buildings taken over, and they'll be charter school ready.
And that's the message that we probably should get out, and is that schools that are being taken over by an online learning environment are not effective nor research-based. And the schools that work are community-based schools that have the investment of a bunch of adults and community members like us looking after them.
Another spin-off, and I think, you're looking at just the money end of things. It wasn't that long ago, when you went to replace textbooks. I mean, I can remember in North Muskegon, we had a textbook and it said in 1991, the United States will, the Panama Canal will revert back to Panama. And kids are reading the book and it's 2005. We couldn't afford to do a social studies thing, K-8 or K-12. It was over $100,000 just for that subject. And then you had, your language arts, which is writing and reading and spelling for kids. The cost of just printed textbooks was huge. And what we had done is we went to a one-to-one in the high school where every kid got a little cheap laptop, basically a way to get them to the internet, because we could buy a subscription, a textbook online that the kid wouldn't have to carry in his backpack that weighed 100 pounds, that cost $85 a pop, that they would tear up in 2 or 3 years, and the kid could go home, or the kid could be sitting anywhere he could get the internet, and he could pull up that textbook. So for us, that was a big cost saving. But it required the investment up front of the little, they weren't full-blown laptops, and I think you guys have Chromebooks, but it's the same concept. I don't think...
But that also requires that the home has a wireless hookup. And
to some extent, because you can, before you leave, make sure you download that and save it to your...
Right, but you can't download the textbook. So at a home where there isn't a wireless hookup.
You absolutely can. I have college textbooks that are
You
completely
can
online.
download the whole textbook
Yeah,
too?
read to my
okay.
daughters. No,
Okay.
fabulous.
I didn't
We
know.
are, we are closing in on 9 o'clock. And Marios, do you have, how many, I mean, I know you had, you know, I don't want to prepare so much, cut off some important piece here, but I think we,
I think we're pretty much done as far as slides. I don't think there's anything that's earth-shattering.
okay.
I was going to argue with you that technology and this millage will save teachers' jobs, not eliminate teachers' jobs. Just from the numbers perspective, if we're going to generate $4.3 million, that's going to be going back to the 11 school districts that now they are spending with their own money. And we know that in the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to be needing $32 million to stay even. And this is going to generate about $13 million during the same period. Then now my problem from 32 million has come down to 18, 19 million dollars that I need to deal with. So that's from the numbers perspective. I think from educators today, I don't think they can survive without technology. And technology makes things easier, cheaper, even anything we do today, we have to use technology.
Technology gets obsolete just like textbooks do.
Eventually something else is going to replace it. But at this point, I think we have a variety of questions.
I just wanted to point out that there are so many students who are going into college, you know, as somebody who just went back to college myself, there are so many students who are coming from high school who have no idea how to use a computer. Because their high schools have 3 computers, they weren't able to take a basic computer use course. There are classes that are offered in college which people shouldn't be taking because they should have that knowledge from high school. And by putting better computer access into them, even if it's not necessarily Chromebooks in everybody's hands, but that familiarity with the technology, there won't be so many kids coming in scared on the college level when you need to be computer literate. You need a computer for research and stuff like that. I think it prepares them at an age when they're easier to understand it. I mean, you put a computer in a 5-year-old kid's hands and give it to him his entire life.
Do students also need to know how to use a library?
Well, the argument is that the library.
We have school districts without libraries right now. I'm just saying.
No, I'm with you.
That's a great point, because I'm a firm believer that the library should be a hub of school. It should be the center of information and the place where people interact around technology and media. And you know, these computers actually do provide a greater access to a library and to the Library of Michigan, and it actually makes checking out a book from a digital book from a White Lake Library easy. And that's how they like to read now too.
Can we have, sorry.
You know, what I'd like
Can we
to
have
add is...
just 2 more questions, and then
Thank you.
Marios will probably give us a few minutes in the room. Yes, I'm counting him as one of the 2.
Yeah, what I would add in on this technology part of it is, I taught in public schools in Michigan for 26 years, and the amount of how much teaching and learning has improved with the use of technology is just unbelievable. You can't even quantify it anymore. These districts need this technology, and they're going to get it one way or the other. And if we listen to the presentation that was done, it's how the state is squeezing us financially. If we don't pass this technology millage, they're still going to be getting this technology, or at least some of it, and it's going to force them to make cuts in other places that are going to hurt our kids so much more.
the idea that technology might become obsolete in a certain number of years, that just makes it more important that we get in there and do it now and learn it, because, under that thing, we're not going to ever touch a computer. That's just not the real life anymore. Our kids in this Muskegon County, they are not competing. 50 years ago, the kids in Muskegon County were competing against the kids down the block. Now they're competing worldwide. We need this technology, and the state's not going to help us. So this is something that's absolutely needed. The idea of using a library, if you don't know how to use a computer, you can't use our libraries today, because the card catalog just isn't there anymore. The technology is just pervasive through the society. That's not going to change. It's only going to get, it's only going to increase. We have to put this technology in our students' hands. We need to. Otherwise, we are putting our kids so far behind the eight ball. Why would we do that to our kids? It's just, it's unthinkable that that's what we would do.
All right, Mark, we have Eric.
I'm sorry to take up a little bit of your time. I did notice one little nuance in there where you kind of lost me. I think it's a great idea overall. I love the idea of technology being a way to liberate and engage students and all of that, except for the censorship software. I've been involved in fights against censorship software since the late 1990s. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The filter doesn't filter out what you want it to filter, but what it does filter out is politically unpopular decisions that are determined in secret by the censors. Why are we investing in that technology of control rather than liberation? Rather than liberation of the student.
Okay, so that was flagging that, Mario, if it's not something you've looked at. We have one more.
I think we have a couple in there.
I just want to commend you for being so open to questions and comments, and I want to ask you about the logistics of the vote. So many residents of this area are somewhere else as snowbirds February 25th. They're going to be absentee ballots available?
Oh, yeah. I believe our clerk at the county clerk, that they send out absentee ballots to anybody over a certain age, I think 60 or something.
That's a lot of snowbirds.
The percent, it's just going to be a simple majority?
Yes.
That will decide this countywide?
Yes.
Or in each district? Or?
No, it's simple majority countywide. So.
One final question.
Yes.
Thanks. And this is a question again for one of my friends who couldn't be here tonight. And she really wanted to be, and so I'm going to try to articulate the question right, then you can answer for her, and she'll see the answer. So I appreciate it. I'd like to preface this, though, just with a little comment that, and not to take time, but what you've been describing for us here, I've heard these arguments for a number of years now about how people have less and less and less and are trying harder and harder to scrimp and save, and not just in education, but just everywhere I look. And I was talking to my wife the other day about something or other. I said, the richest country in the world, and she says, I don't think we are anymore. But of course we are. We are. It's just you look at the Gini index, you see how the money's divided now, and the top elite with the political power and CEOs and stuff like that. Yeah, well, anyway, and so they take more and more, and they're richer than ever, and the country itself is richer, but we have less and less, and so we keep trying to save, and that's what we're trying to do now. Anyway, now I'm going to ask her question. This had to do with something different a little bit, and she's mentioned this a few times to me, and I don't really understand it, but this is the way it goes. There is money appropriated from the federal government, and the county got some, for taking care of blighted properties as a result of banking fiasco, where the corporate CEOs and stuff took all the money, and too big to fail. And so we have all these blighted properties around, and there's federal money available to restore or to just demolish these properties, and a good chunk of that money was acquired and used by the ISD to demolish Bluffton School, which was a very sound building. It could have been used as an old folks' home or something, but it was destroyed instead, and that the people are still paying millage on that building for the next 10 years. Now, can you help me out with an answer on that one?
I can help you with an answer that the ISD did not have anything to do with Bluffton building. That belongs to Muskegon Public Schools,
I see.
Not to the Muskegon Area Intermediate School District.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So,
Okay, all right.
That would be
Well,
Muskegon Public Schools.
would like to acknowledge that this evening we have one of our wonderful state representatives, Marsha Hubbard-Wright, who's joined us, and we appreciate Marsha being here. There's two superintendents from Whitehall and Montague really added value, I think, for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
As well as the person who could speak about technology, and finally let me acknowledge that we have someone who may be a state senator. In the future, Kathy Forbes is running for Senate, and she's sat with us this evening.
a former superintendent?
Sorry?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Muskegon.
All right,
Superintendent of
Muskegon.
Muskegon.
Yes, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, let us thank Marios, because this was a
Yes.
bit contentious and complicated, and he did a wonderful job. We appreciate, he worked all day and made it well.
So heaven.
You know, well, you are most welcome, and perhaps we'll call upon you again in a year's time, see how we're doing. Thank you. So we have